Usually the teams are over there. Here, Bible study.
All right, I guess we will go ahead and get started. We have a different speaker here today. Pastor John is feeling under the weather, so his voice, if you see his voice around, he's lost it somewhere. We're trying to find it. Yeah, we may have to buy a new one on Amazon for him. And hopefully he won't get one of those Chinese models, because we want to be able to understand him when he comes back. So do be praying for Pastor John that he would be feeling better. And would be back with us today. So we're gonna be changing. I don't know what y'all were learning in Sunday school, but we're not going over that because that's not what I was planning to teach the teens. So we're gonna be talking about what the teens were going through. We have been talking about hermeneutics with the teens, how to study the Bible, because it's super important that we study the Bible. And honestly, I really wish my youth pastors had gone through and told me how to study the Bible when I was a teen, because that would have been very helpful, because I had no idea as a teenager. It wasn't until I got to college that somebody actually sat down, and because I was paying them to do so, and taught me how to study the Bible. So this is just we're going through just the very basic, and you can totally study the Bible in a different manner, all right, in a different format or formula, but I'm teaching the teens the basics here. There's a lot more to studying the Bible that I just don't have time, or that I haven't learned yet myself. As we grow and as we mature, we will understand the Bible better and understand how we learn better, and hopefully be able to study the Bible more effectively as we grow. And then when we have glorified bodies, it'll make sense a whole lot easier, I would assume, because this doesn't work a lot. All right, so we started out by informing them that in order to study the Bible, the very first step is you have to read the Bible. All right, and this came as a shock to several of them, I'm sure, because I told them you don't just read it once and be done. No, you read it, and you read it again, 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 until it is just in your mind all the time, until it's just living, abiding in you, and then you're ready to start. You're ready to start getting going. So I had them spend a week figuring out which text they wanted to study. They actually have a text each of them has picked out that they are studying throughout this series, and I'm really pleased with some of the texts that they've picked. I don't know, Allison, she knows not to be here. I was going to pick on her. Anyway, all right. So we read the text because it's so important that we allow the Word of God to tell us what it means, rather than starting out by going to whoever, going to Spurgeon and going to MacArthur and going to all these other people and saying, hey, what does the text mean? No. The text was written so that we can understand it. It's there for us, and even if we are stuck on a desert island and all we have is the Bible, all we have is the Bible, we can still study the Bible, and we can study it deeply. We have these other helps, and we have concordances and lexicons and commentaries and other things that are helpful, later on. But we must start by approaching the text and reading it and understanding it literally. Literally. That is the first step. If we are not coming to the text and understanding it literally, I really don't even understand what you're doing as you're reading the book. Is it a fairy tale you're thinking you're reading? I don't understand those people that don't believe it to be literally. They read it as an allegory, and they look and they say, oh, this Paul fellow, who is that? Oh, that is Patience. No, he was an actual person named Paul. So we must come to the text, and read it literally. We started out reading it over and over, writing it out. I told him, if it helps you, take the time to write it out on another sheet of paper. Then you've got another copy for the next step, because the next step, we told them, okay, now start to examine that text. Take your passage and begin to examine it. Notice everything. Highlight things. Circle things. Connect things with lines. List off on another sheet of paper how many times each word is used. Maybe connect those words. Is God talking in the passage? Are those his direct words given to us? Is Jesus talking? Who's talking? Who's writing? Who are they writing to? Notice all of these things. Where are the words that are emotionally charged? All right, is he talking about how he felt bad, or is he talking about how that he wept bitterly? Because it's important that all of those words are there for a reason. They're not just thrown on the page willy-nilly. This is not just some unedited manuscript that somebody just wrote and people were like, well, that sounds really good. Let's just go with it. No, this is the Word of God, and every word is important. Every word is there for a purpose. So, notice every word. Where are the verbs? Where are the conjunctions? Where are the pronouns? Where are the repeated ideas? Take the time in the text to notice all of these things and highlight them and really allow yourself to pull apart the text and to begin to understand it. What is he saying here? Because the next step, we're going to start trying to understand what is the meaning of the text here. So we need to understand what he's saying first. Then we begin to ask questions of the text. All right, we're not doubting the text. We're not questioning its validity or its authority. We're asking questions because we're interested in it answering us. All right, and I love it. We were talking about this last Sunday. And the Sunday before that, Pastor John was preaching, and he literally in his sermon ran through a whole bunch of questions about the text that we were studying. And he said, what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and what about this? Just this big long list, and I'm like, yes, perfect, teach them. We need to come to the text with an inquisitive mind that wants to learn. All right, and I took a few minutes there for the teenagers to remind them that as we come to the text, we must come to the text in humility, not assuming, because they're teenagers, not assuming that they know everything about the text just because they've been in church for forever. Okay, and for forever. I mean, how long have we studied the Word of God? Oh, I've heard this passage before. Yes, but have you let it dwell within you? Have you let it marinate your mind in this passage? Have you thought about it enough? And the answer is no. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. No, I haven't. None of us have. Because we'll spend the rest of eternity learning about who God is. And learning every day more and more. So let's get started now with practicing what we're going to be doing for the rest of eternity. Okay? So we must come to the text. We must approach our passage prepared to learn and be proven wrong. Our previous assumptions about life, about the world, about who God is, are probably wrong. And we come to the text to be corrected. We come to the text to be instructed. We come to the text to be reproved. We come to the text to be edified, not to be proven correct, not to be proven to be the best person ever, but to be proven that what we really needed was what Christ gave us on the cross. Because it's not in us to be right, it's only in him. And what he gives to us from his word. So then we begin to ask questions of the text. Questions like, if I gave them the example of James 1. So what does he mean by steadfast here? He uses it multiple times. What does he mean when he says steadfast? All right. What is his point by bringing up this theme of steadfast? What is he driving towards? Why do we need to be steadfast? How can we be steadfast? What does the word steadfast mean in the Greek? These are important questions, but there are more. To what extent does the text prohibit whatever it's talking about? When exactly was this text written? Who was it written to? What was happening to the recipients at that time? Is there a connection between this theme and this theme? Is this a continuation of the previous theme, or is it a new theme entirely? What other books did the author write? And is this a recurring theme for the author? Does this passage flow into the next? Does it wrap up the previous passage? There are so many questions that we could ask of each passage, but not until we take the time to maybe actually write them down. All right, and new questions will appear to us, will come to us after we've asked old questions. All right, once we've asked questions and then we've started to get some answers, we may get some more new questions. So leave that sheet of paper available. All right, but also, because we're approaching the text from a humble state, we may not come up with satisfying answers to some of our questions. All right. The teens have been asking lots of questions of me. We do Ask Me Anythings regularly. And we had one Sunday where one of the teens was asking questions in Genesis and the other teen was asking questions in Revelation, and they were kind of the same question. And I had to answer them. The Bible doesn't tell us. The Bible doesn't give us those detailed answers about what the eternal state will be. The Bible doesn't give us those detailed answers about what Adam and Eve's life was like before the fall. The Bible doesn't tell us because we don't need to know now. We'll have to wait until we can ask God himself. And boy, oh boy, won't that be wonderful when we can, and he'll be right there to give us answers. And that'll bring up even more questions, that our inquisitive minds that he's given to us will glorify him by wanting to learn more and more about him for the rest of eternity. So you'll notice that we, even what is this, 4 weeks into this study, we still haven't gotten away from just the text. All right, we're still on our desert island with just the Bible, maybe some extra leaves that we've found so we can write stuff on, kind of help our mind wrap itself around what God is talking about here. We still haven't gone online and Googled anything. All right, we haven't cracked open our vast library of commentaries. We haven't even gone to the very basic lexicons or what's that thing at the end of the book that tells you where all of each word, the concordance. Yeah, we haven't gotten any of these helps yet. We're just interfacing with the text here. We're just wrestling with the text, demanding it give us answers, and waiting breathlessly as we try to understand what has God told us here. All right, it's not because of all of those helps are bad things. Okay, I will regularly open up my library and read commentaries, I'll open up concordances, interlinearies, to say, hey, what is this? What is the meaning of this Greek here? What's the Greek behind this? What's the? I spend a lot of time in the Old Testament. What's the Hebrew behind this? Because I don't know any Hebrew. Okay, I need help with that because I don't know, and that's fine. That's fine. But, and you know, we've got lots of biblical students here. You know, if you jump right into that and you just dive right into, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, I'm just teaching the teens this method. You know, do with it as you will. Change it, modify it so that it fits your mind. But I want us to be careful. I want us to be cautious that we don't run headlong into error by going to some various commentary, because even I have lots of really good commentaries that I look at and I'm like, oh, that's really good. And then I go to other passages and I'm like, oh, he totally missed the mark here because he believes such and such a weird theology that the Bible doesn't teach. My classic example is Scofield. He wrote the Scofield Reference Bible that has been used by my father for hundreds of years. All right? Scofield was a communalist? No. Congregationalist. He was a Congregationalist. And they had some very weird views about baptism. And he had some very weird views about the book of Job and what Leviathan and Behemoth were. And so he shows that in his reference notes in the Scofield KJV Study Bible. And you can look at that and say, he made some mistakes here. Oh no, that's wrong. All right, so as we come to the text, we need to be familiar enough with the text that when we go to the commentaries, all right, when we go online and we're searching and we're like, hey, yeah, what does MacArthur have to say? All right, MacArthur, as my father pointed out to me several times when I was in college, MacArthur is not God. Okay? Really, really good points on lots of passages. Did not write the Bible. Could be wrong, like the rest of us. Could very easily have gotten it wrong. So, become familiar enough with the text that if they say something that seems to be conflicting with the text, our mind will red flag it and say, hey, wait a minute, better double check, better triple check that, because it's important enough that we get it right, okay? So we're stuck in the text. We've read it, we've memorized it, we've written it, we've examined it, we've noted it, we've asked questions of it, we've demanded answers, and now we need to start spreading out from the text, all right? Because the best commentary on the Bible is the Bible itself, okay? The best commentary on the Bible is the Bible itself. Even Christ, as he was here on the earth, was quoting the Old Testament. The New Testament authors quoted the Old Testament all the time. Even some of the Old Testament authors were quoting the prophecies. Hey! The best commentary on the Bible is the Bible itself. So, we need to begin to step back. And that kind of depends. Like I said, this is just kind of the method that I'm teaching to them. If you hit this point and you're like, oh, I really need to understand these words. What do these words mean? What does he mean when he's talking about faith here? He mentions the rich in his humiliation. What does he mean when he says humiliation here? Is that talking about being made fun of? Is that talking about being made a lower statue? What's the meaning of that Greek word behind there? All right? You may want to step back and do some word studies. figure out what the Greek word is there, and then study that Greek word throughout all of the scriptures. What is that? How is that word translated? Is it translated humiliation, or is this the only time it's translated humiliation? Okay. What about the word steadfast? And so at this point we can spread out, and there's a lot of different ways we could go, and none of them are bad. All right, we can begin doing word studies and understanding the Word of God here grammatically. All right, I listed for the teens that we need to study the Word of God literally, literarily, grammatically, historically, theologically, contextually, biblically, and dispensationally. All right, so any one of those are good places to go to at this point. But I would suggest the next logical place is to begin to understand the context of this passage in the entirety of the book that it's written in. So we go back to step one. Read the entire book over and over and over. Oh, Pastor Jason, that's a lot of work. Well, we've got all of eternity to do it, so we might as well get started now. Okay? So it's easy for those people who picked like Jude, because you've already read the whole book of Jude. All right? It's a lot harder for those of you who've picked something in, Psalms. That's going to take you a little while. Or Genesis. That's kind of a big. Isaiah. Ooh. But the books were written with an intent. They were written with a flow. They were written, like I said, we need to understand them literarily. All right, so a lot of the books of the Pentateuch were written narratively. So we need to understand the narrative flow. All right, is this passage at the climax of the story? Or is it in the diminution? Is it in one of the points of building action? Or is this the inciting incident? Where is this in the narrative story? And, for example, the book of Genesis has several of those stories within it. So we need to understand, where is this in the book? Where is it in the flow? If you're reading one of the Pauline epistles, oh boy. Because he wrote them as, a lot of times, as a theological treatise, or pointing out, here is the error that you are doing, let me help you fix it. And so he has this long, logical, built upon each other foundation work. So if you're picking something in the middle of one of those letters, you need to understand all of the things that came before it. Because he might say the word therefore. So you got to go back and understand, where's this therefore? All right, what has he built before that he is now about to build the next block upon? And is this passage that I'm reading, is that one block that he's adding to his logical framework, or is that like 1.5? And I'm trying to make this part of the block mesh with this part, and it's not working because there's a therefore there. There's a however, okay? All right, so as we're studying the whole book that our passage is embedded in, we need to be looking for the therefores, the howevers, for this causes. All right, they help indicate a development of the thought. We need to be looking for the plot of the story. All right, the climaxes, the diminutions, the character entrances, the last mention of a character deaths, character developments, character mistakes. All right, it may even be helpful to write out an outline. If you're like me and you like to be able to look at it and say, look, here's the whole flow, and these are the major points, and this is where my passage is. It's right here, right before the rising action, right after the inciting incident. right after the climax. No, my passage is the climax of the entire story here. All right, it certainly would be helpful for me to be able to look at that and say, aha, here's where we are. This is kind of the whole book in thumbnail. And this is what I'm studying here. This is his major point. These are his major points, and here's my passage that I'm studying. This is what he's driving towards. So let's understand my passage in light of where he's going, in light of where he's been. Okay? As we begin to understand the book in which it's written and the position of the passage we're studying within the whole book, hopefully that will begin to color in our understanding of our passage. He's talking a lot about faith in this book. And so when he mentions our steadfast faith here, that's important. It's important we understand this because he's going to build on this. So this is a foundational understanding of faith here. There's more to it he'll build later. Or you're at the end of that and you're looking back and you're saying, oh, there's so much I need to understand about this faith that he's wrapping up here. About this concept that he's wrapping up here. I need to understand all of this before I really understand what he's talking about here in this passage. All right, so we step back, we look at the whole entirety of a book, and we begin to appreciate and understand the flow of the book, the literature of the book. Is it a Pauline epistle? Is it a narrative? Is it Maybe you're talking about the Psalms, okay? The Psalms are different because they're not necessarily written one upon another. They're written individually. So, whereas it would help to understand, their previous treatment of a concept, of a theme, it won't necessarily help to understand Psalm 138 so that you understand Psalm 139, because they're not one right after another, just because they're one right after another. All right. The Proverbs are interesting. About halfway through the book, it changes from a written by Solomon as one go to individual proverbs given by Solomon throughout his life, edited together by his various assistants. So we need to understand the book that it's written in. Is the context going to help us? Most of the time, it will. All right, context is key. And so we need to understand not just the context within the passage that we're studying, but the context of the entire book that we're looking at here. Now, at this point, I would probably take questions from the teenagers, but also at this point, the teenagers are probably not going to be willing to raise their hand in front of everybody. That's why we don't usually have all the teenagers here. They're shy. And some of them are turning red at this point. Good, fantastic. So yeah, let's see here. Now, for those of you who have studied and have used commentaries in the past, you may be familiar with some of these ideas. All right, because the commentaries, a lot of them will do some of this for you. All right, it does depend on what level of commentary you're using. There are commentaries that are written specifically for people who haven't studied the Bible a lot, lay commentaries, they're called, which I think is honestly a misnomer. We really need to get away from the idea that, oh, yes, pastors study the Bible and everybody else just kind of reads it occasionally. No, nonsense, baloney. Okay, we need to study the Bible, and we all need to be able to pick up a big, heavy commentary and to be able, not necessarily to understand everything they're talking about, all right, but to be able to say, interesting. Oh, that's helpful. Oh, wow, he's wrong here. Huh. Okay, put that back over here. All right. But there are different commentaries, and a lot of the lay commentaries will have within them outlines pre-done. I believe J. Vernon McGee and his commentaries will begin each book with, here's the outline of the book. Who's the guy that writes the B's? Wiersbe. Wiersbe has fantastic outlines of every book that he writes a commentary about. And so right at the beginning, here's the outline of the book. Here's where we're going. Here's all the stops we're going to make along the way. All right, here's your outline. And you may disagree with him. That's fine. All right? Because the most important thing is the text, not the commentary. That's why I'm encouraging the teenagers, start with the text. Get into the text and let the text get into you. Let it abide in you. And then from there, begin to borrow brains. Okay? From there, begin to read other people. Ask your youth pastor. Ask your pastor. Read some commentaries. Maybe very carefully Google it. Okay? Google is actually sometimes helpful. Especially if you're like, that sounds really familiar. That's got to be somewhere else in the Bible. And you just type that in and, oh yes, there it is. And you can cross-reference a lot faster than trying to open a concordance and, okay, where are we? At least for me, for my generation. Okay, that's why I have the laptop here. So if teens ask me important questions, I can be like, oh, let me get to that passage real quick. There it is. All right, here we go. Let's go to it. There are lots of other helps that we can use. All right? There are lots of tools that we can add to our toolbox. But the most important tool is interfacing directly with the text. All right? Those other tools are not going to help you at all to study until you've actually taken the time to study. Those other tools will help you deepen your study faster. That's their real benefit. Okay? Because those other tools were written by men who didn't have those tools and took the time to study the word itself. All of those other tools were written by people who just had the word of God. So we can just start with the word of God and nothing else. And maybe that outline that you wrote down to try and understand your passage, maybe that then becomes a book later. Maybe you write something that helps somebody else because you took the time to study the word and to ask the word questions and find answers. You say, oh, Pastor Jason, oh, I'm just a teenager. I can't. Yeah, well, everybody was a teenager at some point. Even those great men of the past who wrote various things that are wrong to some degree, they were teenagers too. And I hope they had some youth pastor to come by and tell them, hey, you could write a book someday. Why don't you write a book? Hey, you know what? You know what the world needs? The world needs you to write down this because this research you did here, this study, this is fantastic. And everybody needs to hear this because you studied the Word of God faithfully. And you studied it out and you would not stop studying until you got satisfactory answers. And those are great answers. Maybe you should write that down because other people need to hear it. All right? That's the approach we need to take when we study the Bible. Because the Bible was written for us to understand. And so we can understand it. It doesn't need to be some mysterious thing that happens at Bible college, that happens to seminarians. It's not some ivory tower, okay? It's just as approachable to people in hovels in Africa as it is to us here, those of us who go to Maranatha, those of us who study, and those of us who have fancy laptops with fancy Bible study apps on them, okay? We need to study the Bible, and we can. And at some point I need to land this message, but I just keep circling around. So we'll go ahead and we'll stop it suddenly. Thank you all. Y'all are dismissed. Before you're dismissed, just a reminder, we have the ministry poll. It's in the back. We've got a little bit of extra time before we're done with the lesson. So if you haven't filled one of these out, go to the back, grab one, fill it out, put it in the box. That would help us know how to help you better. All right, thank you. Now you're dismissed again. Also.